Here at Android Authority, we love Google Pixel phones, and we've been reviewing them since the very first all the way back in 2016. They usually have the best cameras of any phone, and depending on who you ask, it's the best Android experience that you can get. And this got us thinking, what is the very best and the very worst of Google Pixel's phones? Before we get into the video, if you like the latest and greatest from Android and enjoy some of the best reviews on the latest Android devices, then subscribe to the Android Authority YouTube channel so you don't miss out on anything. Also, this video is brought to you by CookTech 10 Power Bank, and just stay tuned till later on because this is an impressive little power bank. To rank the best and worst Pixel phones, we wanted to give every phone its fair shot, so there's no folds in this list and there's no A series either, and there's a couple of things that we took into consideration. We've looked at specs, features, importance of release, and there's a bit of our own Android Authority bias in there somewhere. I know not all of you will agree with where we list our best and worst Google Pixels, so let us know in the comments down below where you rank yours, but let's start in stone cold last, and you might be able to guess what this Google Pixel is first in our list, and it is the Google Pixel 6 and the 6 Pro. The Pixel 6 was impressive on paper, and as always, it had great camera hardware, and the pictures that it took were what you expected from a Pixel at this point. It had fairly big design change, big batteries, and price was something which we all enjoyed. It was also a pretty ambitious release because this was the first phone in the Pixel lineup that had Google's Tensor chip. Sadly, as good as it was on paper, it wasn't as good to use. The Tensor chip had pretty bad cellular connectivity, and when your phone doesn't work as a phone, it's never going to go down well. Couple this with phones that heated up hotter than the sun, slower charging speeds than even I care to remember, and fingerprint scanners where at launch they were pretty bad. And to top it all off, Google removed something which we love from Pixel phones, and that was the unlimited high-quality storage backup on Google Photos. So, putting all of this together, this is why the Pixel 6 and 6 Pro comes firmly in last place. I'm a bit sad of where we've had to rank the next phone, and this was one of my favourites ever, and I'm not sure why, but coming in at 7th place is the Pixel 4 and Pixel 4 XL. The reason I'm a bit sad of where this ranks is that I loved the design of the Pixel 4. It's almost panda look, it's squeezed for assistant, and a really lovely smooth 90Hz display. Astrophotography was also introduced, and I know most people barely use this or only used it a few times, but this was a genuinely cool camera feature. It also had a recorder app that was seen as a revelation by some, and depending on where you sat, it had a pretty good 3D face unlock. That 3D face unlock though did come at the expense of a fingerprint reader, and one of Google's newest, biggest features with motion sense was blocked in a load of countries. You add in the fact that we only had dual cameras on the Pixel 4 when Samsung and Huawei were out there offering triple camera setups, and at the time it was also pretty expensive. This ranks so low for one reason and one reason only, is that it probably had the worst battery life that I've ever had on any Google Pixel. Which means sadly, for what I think is the best looking Pixel in our list, it falls into second to last place. A lot of people say that sequels never live up to the hype of the original, and I'm not sure people were right about this, because next on the list is the Google Pixel 2 and 2 XL. There are a couple of firsts on the Pixel 2 and XL, and one of my all-time favorites is now playing. We also saw dust and water resistance for the first time with an IP67 rating, and another first was eSIM support. Along with Active Edge so you could squeeze for Assistant, 3 years of updates and some really solid cameras, things look promising for the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL. It did though let itself down in some places. Despite mocking Apple the year before, Google followed through and also removed the headphone jack, and if you paid the huge $849 for the 2XL, you had a pretty awful experience with the display, and even if you went for that smaller Pixel 2, you had bezels that were big enough to land planes on. We also didn't get any wireless charging on either of these phones when Samsung and Apple had both fully embraced it. Even though the 2 and 2XL brought us some great features that we still use today, like now playing, sadly it let itself down in more places than it did make itself look good. So this is why it sits at number 6 on our list. I don't really know what I feel about this next Pixel. It's not really good, and it's also not really bad, and that's why it sits right in the middle of our list, and at 5 is the Google Pixel 5. This was an interesting release for Google. It still hadn't opted for triple cameras when every other major flagship had, and it stuck with the same 12.2 megapixel camera. It also opted to go with a pretty middle of the range Snapdragon chip, which actually meant that it was less powerful than the Pixel 4 the year before. And for whatever reason, there was also no XL version of the Pixel 5, so you were stuck with the smaller form factor whether you liked it or not. And a lot of people did really like that smaller form factor and really liked that 90Hz display. 5G was introduced for the first time on a Pixel, and this was the last time we sadly ever saw a rear fingerprint reader. And actually, talking of lasts, it's the last in the series to have that unlimited Google Photos backup as well. So a phone from Google that actually was okay. It wasn't really good and it wasn't really bad at anything, and that's why the Google Pixel 5, aptly named, sits at number 5 on the list. Before we have a look at the next ranking, let me talk to you about the Tech 10 power bank, and this is a seriously impressive 10,000 mAh power bank which has ultra fast charging at 120 watts, and you can charge the power bank to 55% in just 15 minutes. It's lightweight, compact and aeroplane safe, so you can take it wherever you need to and use its Type A and Type C ports to charge your devices, and of course you can use that real-time display to see all the information you might need. It's fantastic if you're a gamer as well, because if you have a Nintendo Switch, for example, it can charge that fully 1.3 times. If the Tech 10 power bank sounds like a little bit of you, check the description below for all the details you need to pick one of these up yourself. Without this next phone, we wouldn't even be talking about a list of the best and worst Pixels, because this one is the original OG Google Pixel. This was undoubtedly a landmark release for Google and shapes a lot of what we see now. Google wanted control over how Android could look and feel, and the best way to do that was to create the Google Pixel. We saw Google Assistant integration, unlimited original quality Google Photo backup, and 3 years of updates, which at the time was really impressive. By far the strongest selling point of the original Google Pixel was its camera quality, and it had some really impressive cameras with some really impressive HDR+. And depending on who you ask, Google Pixel still carries that mantle today of being the best camera on any phone you can pick up. Shockingly though, this was the only Google Pixel to ever have a headphone jack. It wasn't all great though, and with a new named first gen product, you kind of come to expect it. There was no water or dust resistance on either the smaller or the XL version, no OIS for the camera, and even though the phones would get 3 years of updates, you'd be lucky if it lasted that long with how prone it was to getting chips and dents. The other downside of the original Pixel is that it was carrier locked to Verizon in the US, and the XL cost $849. Because of this, even though it was the first Pixel, it doesn't quite give it enough to make the top 3 and sits at number 4. Next is arguably the best Google Pixel before we entered that Tensor era of phones. And you'll probably know what this one is already, but this is the Google Pixel 3 and 3 XL. If I asked you to name one thing that stood out about the Pixel 3 series, I would guess you would say that huge notch that came with the 3 XL, and it got a lot of stick at the time for being one of the worst looking notches on a phone of all time. But you know what? I kind of liked it. It allowed us to have dual selfie cameras, which was something that we hadn't seen on a Pixel before. The cameras also got some nice new software updates as well, things like night sight, and I remember at the time finding night sight to be such a cool feature. Super Res Zoom also gave the Pixel 3 owners some really solid 2x zoom shots, and that IP had jumped from 67 to what we all have now in IP68. And for the very first time, we finally saw some wireless charging on a Google Pixel. One of the biggest failings of the Pixel 3 series though was its price, and this was expensive. $799 for the regular and $999 for the XL, and for that you wouldn't want any disappointment, but sadly that is what you got, with one of the lowest brightest screens that I've seen on a phone in a long time, and it was so annoying. Another irritating part was, once again with the Pixel phone, the battery life was just not what you'd expect of a phone just shy of $1,000. This was the last Pixel to also have the iconic two-tone color on the back of the phone, and just for that alone it takes it into our top 3, and that is where the Pixel 3 and 3 XL sits. The Pixel 6 and 6 Pro was the worst Pixel on our list, so could its predecessor do any better? Well, the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro sits at number 2. And it's there for a reason. The Pixel 7 and 7 Pro pretty much fixed everything that was wrong the year before. The awful cellular connectivity seemed to be pretty much fixed. The Pixel 6 had a load of bugs, the Pixel 7 fixed them. The fingerprint scanner that didn't really work at launch on the Pixel 6 had also been fixed on the new 7. Again, it almost goes without saying on this list, but the Pixel 7 and 7 Pro had some really top quality cameras. And it gave you some excellent photos and added some features such as photo on blur. And you also got other features such as clear calling, and maybe a lot of people didn't use this, but you also got free access to Google One VPN, which you can't really complain about. Of course, there were issues with the Pixel 7, and the biggest issue for us was its slow charging speed. The charging was horribly slow, and the battery could and should have been a bit better than it was. And the phones still got hot, which is something that Google didn't manage to fix. Tensor G2 was certainly better than the original, but still lagged behind some of its rivals like Samsung and Apple. The Pixel 7 and 7 Pro though was a really solid phone and good effort by Google, and the software experience was probably one of the best you'd ever have had on a Google Pixel phone, so that's why it makes number 2 on the list. Taking top spot of every single Google Pixel phone probably is no surprise, and it's the latest and greatest from Google. It's the Pixel 8 and the Pixel 8 Pro. This could be a bit of bias as it's still really fresh in my mind, but the Pixel 8 series really is a great phone. There are 7 years of OS and security updates taking us up until 2030. Not that anyone will take advantage of this, but it's still nice to have. Google also gave some really cool AI features with Circle to Search, Magic Editor, and Video Boost. The heating issues that plagued the 6 and 7 had mostly been fixed, and it had some of the best displays that we've ever seen on any Pixel. They're brighter and punchier, and they're just enjoyable to use. The letdowns of the Pixel 8 series this year, sadly, was the Pixel 8. It misses out on features such as Video Boost, Gemini at launch, and of course those manual camera controls. It does also miss out on one of the weirdest inclusions in a phone that I've ever seen, which is that temperature sensor. And if any of you have ever used that temperature sensor more than once, I'm going to eat my hat. There was also a price increase of $100 this year, which, while annoying, is kind of inevitable. Charging though is still slow compared to some of the other flagships, which is something that we really want to be improved. Having said that though, the Google Pixel 8 and 8 Pro take the top spot on our list of ranking every single Google Pixel from worst to best. So let me know in the comments, do you agree with our list? And if you don't, put in your own list in the comments, because I'm curious to see where you would rank some of these phones. I dare one of you to put the Pixel 4 at number 1. I'd love you forever. Before you head off though, if you subscribe to the Android Authority YouTube channel, that means that you won't miss a single video that we upload. So if you do that, then I will see you in the next video.